p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At 3 o'clock on Christmas Day, it was King Charles's first speech to the nation. Did it cut the mustard? We'll debate that. We'll talk also about the woman arrested for silent prayer outside an abortion clinic. Had she really broken the law? And joining me on Talking Pints, Richard Town, former London politician, now transport expert. We'll talk about the ULEZ zone, expanding 20-mile-an-hour speed limits and lockdowns, car lockdowns coming in Canterbury, Oxford and much of the rest of the country. But before all of that, let's get the news.
Thanks, Nigel. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. West Midlands Police have named a 23-year-old man killed at a nightclub in Birmingham last night as Cody Fisher. His family issued a statement saying they have broken our hearts. Officers were called to the Crane nightclub just before midnight on Boxing Day after reports that a man had been stabbed on the dance floor. Hundreds of people were at the club at the time. Witnesses are being urged to come forward. At least 60 people have died and thousands are without power as winter storms continue to hammer the US and Canada. Freezing temperatures and blizzard conditions have left many areas under more than 4 feet of snow. The city of Buffalo in New York State has been hit the hardest, with 28 fatalities, many people freezing to death in their cars. President Joe Biden has declared a federal emergency. Mark Sommer is a journalist with Buffalo News. He told us people were warned not to use the roads.
There was a travel ban instituted immediately on Friday morning, but it didn't stop a lot of people from getting in their cars. Maybe they wanted to rush to relatives' houses for Christmas. Maybe they wanted to get supplies at the last minute. Whatever the case may be, a lot of people were out of their homes when they shouldn't have been, and some froze to death. It also made it really difficult for search and rescue operations and for snowplows to clear the roads because they had these scattered, stranded cars all over the place.
Well, back here, Merseyside Police has vowed to be relentless in its murder investigation of a 26-year-old woman killed on Christmas Eve. Elle Edwards was shot at the Lighthouse pub in Wallasey Village while celebrating Christmas with friends and family. The 30-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. A 19-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. Rail passengers are being told to expect significant disruption into the new year amid a wave of industrial unrest across the country. There were busy scenes at London's King's Cross station earlier due to the knock-on effects of Boxing Day strikes. Members of the TSSA at Cross Country have been staging a 24-hour walkout as part of a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. The Independent's travel correspondent, Simon Calder, says the argument is over more than money.
They're particularly concerned about is the extraordinarily complex network of rules, which date back, some of them to Victorian era. They don't want those overturned unless they're going to get an extra percentage for modernisation. And that's really the sticking point.
And a yellow weather warning remains in place for snow and ice in the north and east of Scotland. The Met Office says freezing conditions could last until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Traffic Scotland says motorists should plan ahead with ongoing travel disruption likely due to patchy ice, mainly on higher routes. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're watching the People's Channel, GB News. Back now to Nigel Farage.
Good evening. I hope you had a very good Christmas. Now, of course, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a tradition that goes back to 1932, we always have the speech. It's been the Queen's speech for the last 70 years, but it was the King's speech this year. What did we think of it? Well, there were parts of it I thought were very good. Other parts of it that raised some really quite big questions. But I'm not going to give you my views on all of that because I'm very lucky to be joined by historian and broadcaster David Starkey. But our real debate is, did the King's speech cut the mustard? Give me your thoughts, Farage at gbnews.uk. David Starkey, good to see you. The last 45 seconds or so of his speech, he talked about his visit to Bethlehem, the Church of the Nativity, and there's one sentence that really stood out for me. He said, while Christmas is, of course, a Christian celebration, the power of light overcoming darkness is celebrated across the boundaries of faith and belief. I thought that was very, very good.
It is, and the way that he then flowed effortlessly from the church to the mosque, to the synagogue, to the temple. That was beautifully. By the way, the speech as a whole was very, very well written. The King writes his own speeches, and he writes them well, and that was very good. Okay. Then we get to the ifs.
Okay. Well, let's just go back one step. The choice of location,
yeah.
The image. I mean, we've been so used to the Queen at a desk, with family portraits. St George's Chapel was chosen. This was out of respect to his late mother, I guess.
Clearly. But of course, she occasionally used things like the cavalry barracks in the time of war. So, again, in other words, again, the use of place to echo, which is the right thing you do with this. But of course, it does raise a very interesting question, doesn't it? The extent to which that was a highly contrived television spectacle. There's an element there that the medium rather took over the message. I mean, I reckon they spent 6 months choosing that suit tie and pocket, and pocket handkerchief, and they perhaps spent a little less time thinking about the text. So I had an uncomfortable feeling watching it that this is really a Marks and Spencer's advertisement. It looked and felt like an upmarket department store. I expected to see a kind of strap line which said, this isn't just guff, this is right royal guff.
Well, David Starkey never without an opinion, is he? Now, let's get to the guff.
Absolutely.
Because there was a lot of talk here about the public sector, about nurses. There were echoes.
Emergency services.
Emergency services, yeah, but the health sector was mentioned specifically as well. And there were echoes of Boris Johnson outside the steps of Number 10. The NHS is the envy of the world, and we all have to clap. Why was he wrong to do that?
He was right and wrong. Again, this is what's so interesting. In one sense, that this is completely in the spirit of the Queen's Christmas broadcasts. The emphasis on service. Remember, if you get a decoration, if you get an honour, you get it for services to something. So this idea of going one beyond. The very great danger, though, is you identify that notion of going beyond only with the public sector, the public services. And there was a very alarming juxtaposition, wasn't there? Our armed services and the emergency services. Well, actually, the armed services are covering for the emergency services, which are on strike. And you again have really uncomfortable echoes now. You have the Royal College of Nursing going on strike, a body that was founded, that receives royal patronage specifically because it elevates the idea of nursing not as a job, but as a profession, a vocation, and a calling. So what we've got here is a monarch, I think, who hasn't quite got his political bearings, whether he ever will is another matter, who needs advice and needs reminding that we're at a genuine moment of crisis. You mentioned 1932. 1932 is, of course, immediately after the formation of a national government. It's at the peak of the catastrophe of the economy of the 1930s and so on. And the king had done what? George V hadn't only given a Christmas broadcast, he put together a national government. And I think we're at a stage now where the monarchy has really got a possible role, a genuine role. We're at a stage now, you know this, I know this, the station constantly highlights the fact our government doesn't work. The NHS, for which we either sing hymns in St George's Chapel or bang pans, doesn't work. We desperately need a kind of all-party consensus. Who could better give it? What would be a more appropriate mission? Not just going back to George V, but going back even further to the previous generation, to Edward VII. He's the man who really funds the London hospitals. He creates the King's Fund. And of course, Nigel, there's another little awkward question, isn't there? The royal family does not use the NHS. No. They use the King Edward VII Hospital for officers. Now, wouldn't it be sensible to admit that? Wouldn't it be sensible to admit why they do it? And to say what we want to do is to merge the best of public and private. We want to introduce a broader measure of excellence. We want to introduce a bigger concept of service. I'd like to have another service too. Food service. Imagine if during the lockdown we'd had a national food service. We'd have all starved. And instead, the lad from Sainsbury's who turned up to me this morning, he turned up throughout that. He did his job. He didn't complain about it. He didn't moan about COVID. He didn't go on strike. He may have asked for more pay. I have no idea. But he did his job.
Yes, I mean, he was eulogising all public services, as you say, at a moment when many are going on strike, and that perhaps wasn't very bright. David, a final thought. You know, the Queen, we used to see her more often than not with photographs of various generations of her family around her. She often talked about Christmas being a great family time and being together, and how she lamented lockdown not being with, as I think many of us did, or at least those that obeyed the rules. I'm not sure I can include myself in that. But interesting, wasn't it? He talked about the Prince and Princess of Wales, visiting Wales. No mention of Harry, no mention of Meghan. Are they now effectively banished?
I think until there's a reconciliation, which seems infinitely unlikely, the answer is yes. And do you know what? I think rightly so. They have played the game of a footsie game, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You can't do it. And it was done, as it were, by silence. It wasn't done by some explicit banishment. No. This is not the treatment. This is not the treatment of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. But you know what? It may eventually have to be.
Yes, we've had the 6-part Netflix. We haven't
the biography.
We've got this book coming out, Spare. But after that, they've said all they can say, surely.
Oh, you underestimate the degree of their capacity to turn a molehill into the Himalayas. A tiny speck of grievance becomes this kind of Vesuvius of resentment. It's an extraordinary achievement. It's a kind of genius, but it's a really destructive genius. I used to make the joke that Harry had met and married his mother. Unfortunately, he's married his mother with all the destructive aspects of Diana and none of the constructive ones. It's a horrible, painful parody of that relationship and profoundly damaging.
David Starkey, thank you. And what do you think at home? Is David Starkey right? You know, to really stand there and to say that everything about our public services and those that work within is wonderful, as so many are going on strike. Was that a wise thing for King Charles to do? I don't think so. I must say, in a moment, we're going to have a proper moral debate. A woman was arrested for silently praying outside an abortion clinic. Had she really broken the law? And why has no other UK broadcaster even touched this story? We're back with that in 2 minutes' time.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. So your thoughts on the King's speech. Phil says the speech was better than I expected. thought there might have been a lecture on the environment and the climate. So promising. I must admit, Phil, I was waiting for that part of it as well, and it didn't happen, I'm pleased to say. Judy says, yes, he did cut the mustard. Another says, I thought the King's speech was a load of cobblers. Too much VT and very little substance. I watched out of habit. And that, in a way, is the point that David Starkey was making when he said it looked a little bit like a Marks and Spencer's Christmas advert. And finally, Alison says, I enjoyed his speech. And look, you know, I think we are all wishing, or the vast majority of us, we are wishing our new king well. But there were points of concern. Of that, there is no doubt. Now, just before Christmas, this happened outside an abortion clinic in Birmingham. Have a look, have a listen to this package.
What are you here for today?
Physically, I'm just standing here.
Okay. Why here of all places? I know you don't live nearby.
But this is an abortion centre.
Is you standing here part of a protest?
No, I'm not protesting.
Are you praying?
I might be praying in my head.
You're under arrest on suspicion of failing to comply with the Public Spaces Protection Order, which is under the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act 2014. Now, I'll caution you again, you do not have to say anything.
Well, the woman in question was Isabel Vaughan Spruce, and Isabel is a director of the anti-abortion group March for Life UK. Now, what is really fascinating about this story is that Tucker Carlson of Fox News, and that is the biggest current affairs programme in the United States of America, Tucker Carlson did a big issue on this. And of course, we're talking about abortion rights, but more than that, we're talking about free speech. We're talking about the limits of protest. And I mean, whichever way you look at this, I suppose she wasn't exactly climbing up a gantry on the M25 to make a protest. Well, I'm very pleased to say that Isabel Vaughan Spruce joins me down the line from Worcestershire this evening. Isabel, good evening. Thank you for coming on the programme. I'm pleased we're the first UK broadcaster to touch this story. Can I just ask you, do you make this a regular habit to stand outside abortion clinics?
So I have been praying outside abortion centres for nearly 20 years. I offer alternatives to women there, and I know well over 100 women who've accepted the help that I've given them so that they can continue their pregnancies, and that help has continued for as long as they need it. But just to make it clear, on this particular instance, I wasn't offering help in a practical sense. I wasn't talking to anyone. I hadn't spoken out loud. I was simply standing by myself with my own thoughts. And it seems that my own thoughts weren't in accordance with what the police were happy with. And so they arrested me based on my own thoughts. That's what happened.
Yes. I mean, you know, there's the sort of element there of the police officer arresting you for what you were thinking does raise some very, very disturbing points. Isabel, you were arrested, you were taken away, you've been charged. You could face, potentially, as I understand it, given the legislation, you could face up to 6 months in prison. Is that right?
Well, that's the new legislation that's likely to come in. So at the moment, what's happened in Birmingham is they've got a PSPO, a Public Space Protection Order, that some people might be familiar with. These were formerly used for things like drunken disorderly behaviour and dog fouling and things like that. And there's now some of them around various abortion centres around the country. And they don't ban people, and that's just important to make it clear. It's not like a restraining order that says certain people can't go in a certain area. It bans behaviour. And so particularly it bans protesting around abortion centres. And this happens
and you're, you know, yeah, I understand this. The law is evolving, and we're going to dig in to the legal side of this in just a moment. Can I just ask you, in terms of March for Life UK, on the issue of abortion itself, are you against abortion in all circumstances?
I always think that women deserve a better choice, and there always is a better choice than abortion. I don't believe that the intentional ending of a child's life is a positive decision.
OK, well, Isabel Vaughan Spruce, you have an opinion that probably is a minority in this country, but you hold it with great passion. And I have to say, I can't see you did anything, frankly, on that day, over which you should have been arrested. And I thank you for joining me on the programme. Well, Lois McClatchy is a lawyer with ADF UK, and you are going to be fighting this case for Isabel. There is this whole question of public space protection orders. Now, these can be brought in by local authorities, but there is a move for much stronger national legislation on this. Just in terms of the specifics of the law, my understanding in Birmingham is that you can be arrested for doing this if you have intention to harass or intimidate. Is that right?
So ADF UK are pleased to be supporting this case. I'm communicating on that case on their behalf. And in the state of the PSPO in Birmingham, it was brought in as a move to end harassment towards women. And that's something as ADF, Isabel herself, we all agree that harassment is absolutely wrong and it should be criminalised, and thank goodness it already is criminal to harass a woman in any part of life, any part of a public street. Of course, harassment's illegal. The PSPO in Birmingham and the PSPO that has been brought out across 5 other councils at this moment in time bans harassment, intimidation, but goes much, much further. So it says that you can't approve or disapprove or express approval or disapproval of abortion within the zone that it's marked out for about 150 metres around the clinic. And they say that prayer is a part of that. Now, Isabel was praying...
So let's just come back to that. So to pray out loud would be in contravention of that bylaw, yeah?
It says that the prayer would be seen as a move of approval or disapproval. Now, whether this PSPO itself is lawful under international human rights law, which protects freedom of religion, freedom of thought, conscience and belief, and freedom of speech, is another really important question for this case. It's not my position that Isabel even necessarily broke the PSPO because she was praying only inside her head. She wasn't expressing anything on the outside. But even if she had, is the PSPO lawful in itself if it's going so far to say that a citizen cannot pray?
So is this going to be a test case?
It's going to be an interesting case for PSPO legislation, but also for a law that the government is pushing through Parliament right now. Clause 9 of the Public Order Bill would roll out these censorship zones across abortion clinics across the UK, and it would ban even expression of opinion, occupying space, advising, persuading, informing. All of these things would be criminal activities on the public street. It's a very un-British, undemocratic law to say that you can't express opinion no matter how peacefully, how kindly you're doing it. Suddenly we've crossed the threshold from banning how you say something to banning what you say. This is a content-based, viewpoint-based discrimination law.
Yes, I mean, I assume that the Public Space Protection Order will not apply to the M25.
Well, this law that's being pushed through Parliament is set up to be tackling the environmental protesters who've been causing a little bit more of headlines in recent years. But unfortunately, pro-life volunteers who mainly offer charitable help, who pray outside of clinics, are being swept up amongst these
So the idea is that actually this will target, I mean, the bridges behind us here that have been blocked. This is why the law's coming in. So how have abortion clinics become part of this?
Well, it's a huge question because the government considered putting in censorship zones for a while ago, and they did an investigation in 2018, a report to see if they were necessary, if there was really harassment and very disruptive protests going on outside abortion clinics. In 2018, they found that that was not the case, that harassment was very rare and already criminalised and already prosecutable. But the main activities that they found to be there were offering charitable help services to women who would like to avoid abortion if they had financial support, practical support, other options. It's a pro-choice measure, you might say, to offer women other options of support. And there was also a great deal of prayer. Most people were praying outside of abortion facilities. So these two activities, offering help and prayer, are good, peaceful and lawful activities. But this new law and the PSPOs that have been rolled out in 5 councils already have hindered those lawful activities.
OK, we're going to follow this case with great interest. Thank you,
Thank you very
Lois,
much
for coming on and explaining that. So there we are. Big national legislation coming before Parliament at some point in 2023, but it seems to be rather more all-encompassing than perhaps was first intended, or maybe I've got that wrong. And by the way, I'm not a pro-life campaigner. I do believe in choice, but I have to say, I thought the police going out of their way to arrest Isabel in that way was a wholly unnecessary act. In a moment, we'll talk about the damage Jeremy Hunt is doing to Britain's creativity, prosperity, and what the impact of that's going to be on middle-class income families.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness,
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it was Christmas Day, but what the Farage? That doesn't stop the migrant boats from crossing the English Channel. Oh no, there was a bit of a window there in the weather. And 90 people came in and were processed through Dover and then Manston on Christmas Day. That brings our grand total for 2022 up to 46,000. Now, I absolutely guarantee you that we're not going to get anywhere near the 50,000 this year because the weather forecast for the next few days is horrendous, with winds of up to 50 and 60 miles an hour in the English Channel. But it's still 46,000, up from 28,000 last year. This situation is completely out of control. And just to remind ourselves, the big change that came this year were the sheer numbers that have come from Albania. Somewhere between 12 and 15,000 fit-bodied, able-bodied young men from Albania have come over the course of this year. It is completely out of control. We keep hearing doesn't matter which Home Secretary it is, doesn't matter which Prime Minister it is, we keep hearing that dealing with this is an absolutely urgent priority. Backbench members of Parliament warn that if it's not dealt with, they're going to lose the next election in a big, big way. And I have to tell you, there is no single proposal that I've yet seen from this government that will make any difference whatsoever. One of those MPs who's warned very loudly about it is Lee Anderson, the Conservative Member of Parliament, the former miner for Ashfield, and he's been voted by Con Home, you know, the big site for Tory members and activists, and they voted him Backbencher of the Year, and he's won by a country mile. I have to say, Lee Anderson, thoroughly well deserved. A Member of Parliament in touch with real people, that can speak to real people, unlike our Prime Minister, who at a soup kitchen the other day asked a chap who'd come for breakfast what business he worked in. He said, I'm homeless, Gov. I mean, they haven't got a clue. And nor, I have to say, has the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt. A report out in the last few days by the think tank CEBR, their estimate is that a middle-earning couple in this country will pay an extra, you know, I mean, it's hard to believe, but up to £10,000 more tax over the course of the next decade. So families are being absolutely fleeced, and we're making our country the least competitive in the whole of Europe. It's almost unbelievable. People are going to Portugal, they're going to Italy, they're leaving this country. We are making this country literally uncompetitive, a place that people won't invest in. They've just got this hopelessly, utterly wrong in every way. Some more thoughts to the King's speech, and lots of reaction coming in. Nicole says, good speech, I thought. No woke comments, which was also good. You're right, Nicole, no woke comments, but outright praise for sectors that are going on strike, and that's perhaps wasn't very wise. Another says, it was just average, nothing compared to our late Queen, but who in the world could follow her? You're absolutely right, but David Starkey made a very interesting point. He said in the early years, in the 1950s, the Queen often didn't get it right. She got better and better as time went on. David says it was good, his first one, and he gave it much needed positivity. And finally, one says, could be better, but it could have been worse. Well, look, I thought the bits about Bethlehem, the bits about religion, all of that, he really did get right. Now, let me tell you something else that isn't going right. We've been talking over the last couple of weeks about the cost of fuel. I've mentioned also these lockdowns that are being proposed in Canterbury, in Oxford. It is quite astonishing what is actually going on. And I'm going to be joined on Talking Pints by Richard Town. He's a former London politician. He's worked for many years in the transport sector. I'm going to be talking 20-mile-an-hour zones, the ULEZ extension, what is happening in those cities, and what this war against the motorist is really all about. All of that on Talking Pints in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
It's that time of the day. It's Talking Pints. I'm joined by Richard Town. Richard, welcome to the programme.
Thank you, and a Happy New Year.
Yeah, it's coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
Richard, you've done stints as a naval officer. You've worked in traffic and transport for many, many years and got a great deal of expertise on it. But fascinating to see that you were a member of the old GLC, the Greater London Council.
Yeah.
Now, this is something that Mrs. Thatcher absolutely hated. Did she hate the GLC, or was it Ken Livingstone and what she saw as the loony left?
A, she hated the GLC, and B, the Treasury hated the GLC for the simple reason that the Greater London Authority Act, as it was at the time, had its own revenue powers and could raise its own money in the House of Commons without it being opposed. And so there was a power struggle between the Treasury and the GLC, one which colleagues of mine, when I left, and I worked to take advantage of, and we got the GLC abolished, and with the London residuary body. Unfortunately, Tony Blair put back the Greater London Authority, which has been a pain in...
I gotta say, but I mean, didn't London, given the sheer size and importance of it, need some form of cooperation across the whole of the capital?
You would have thought so, but the electoral change between one election and the next meant that there was a difference always in political power, a political party between the national government, the regional government of the GLC, or now the Greater London Authority, and the local councils. And so they were always at war with each other.
A bit like devolution then, really.
And they still are today. Well, the problem with there's no problem with devolution because we won, but others will disagree with you.
Are we better off or worse off with a Greater London Assembly, a mayor, than we were in the days of the GLC and, say, Ken Livingstone?
At the moment, we have a strange, awkward situation called proportional representation, which allows members of the Liberal Democrat Party, Green Party, and even in previous administrations, fascists, the National Party, to gain a voice, and they shouldn't have done so. Yes, they did. Two National Party members...
No, that's not true. Two UKIP members did.
Well,
two UKIP members did, which is a bit different to that. But, I mean, look, PR aside, you know, does Khan have more power than Livingston did, or less?
Khan has more power simply because he's chairman of Transport for London, and he uses Transport for London as the arm of creating revenue and putting statutes on the book, which means the ultra-low emission zone, which was started in central London together with the T-charge zone, quite correctly, because it was filthy air in the centre of London, but then to have expanded it to the north and south circular roads was a revenue generator, and now he's expanding it again to the Greater London boundary. And this is absolutely daft. It bears no relation to any health related requirements whatsoever. Go on Imperial College's website. You can check what air pollution you're not getting by putting in your own postcode. It'll come up always at green.
Yeah, I mean, I live on the North Downs, right on the edge, you know, and someone said to me in the pub the other day, she said, to go and get my newspapers is going to cost me £12.50 a day. You know, just to go to the local shop is going to cost £12.50. And I'm very struck that the air quality, as you say, in outer London isn't a problem at all. In fact, it's no problem whatsoever. And the people this is really affecting, Richard, are those with older cars and without the money to buy new cars.
Exactly right.
Is there anything... Because I saw a letter in the Times in the last 2 days from some health professionals saying the extension of ULEZ was absolutely the right thing to do because London had so many respiratory problems. I don't buy that argument at all. I did see the former Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, who's got a constituency, again, right on the edge of the Greater London area, making some noise. Is there anything that can be done to stop this ULEZ extension?
Well, certainly, but it's going to take a judicial review, and that judicial review is going to cost upwards of £30,000. To be able to put forward. The Mayor has issued a consultation paper. He said that it's going to be a true consultation, and yet the consultation result did not turn in his favour. So he's quietly dropped it, and it doesn't refer to it anymore. We believe on the newsletter that I publish, we believe that it's a statutory consultation. So that's one particular aspect that we can put forward. Secondly, there are now 8 boroughs, 5 of whom I can name. There's 8 boroughs which are going to be pursuing a policy of non-cooperation. That's not allowing the ULEZ cameras to be erected on
that right?
On their boroughs.
Wow.
And on planning grounds, simply because they know full well that the difficulties in commuting, as you say, an older person wanting to get to a hospital. We've also been pursuing the possibility of older cars being converted to low-pressure gas. A clean, biodegradable, carbon zero fuel, and the Mayor won't look at that. He won't look at that because this is a money-making exercise to finance more mad schemes from Transport for London.
But Richard, we've talked about the Mayor's powers, right? Who holds them? I mean, can the GLA hold him accountable or not really?
The GLA can hold him accountable. In fact, Grant Shapps, the last but one Transport Secretary, stopped with his grant settlement to pay Transport for London, stopped him using the money for the expansion of ULEZ to the Greater London boundary. And that was a condition of the grant payment. It's called the paragraph 22 in Grant Shapps' letter. Unfortunately, there are, at the moment, 3 Green members and 2 Liberal Democrats who will vote or is expected to vote with the Labour Party members on the GLA, and they want a 2/3 majority, and they can just vote the extra funds. £250 million for the extra cameras and back office equipment.
Well, I must say, this is very interesting. The fact there are boroughs now who are looking to become quite non-compliant on this is perhaps the beginning of a real campaign here. At least I hope it is. And by the way, if you're sitting at home thinking, this is just London, this doesn't affect me at all, well, I mean, you can knock me down with a feather when I saw the proposals in Canterbury and the proposals for Oxford, and goodness knows where else this war against the car goes. But basically, these are almost like lockdowns within cities, so you can't leave a certain part of a city. What's the big picture here? Is this all about climate change? Is this all the belief that the car is evil?
There is a belief now being perpetuated by the climate change lobby, who are very well financed and take great salaries from promoting the evils of climate change to the general population, local authorities, and the Mayor of London and the Greater London Assembly has swallowed these fibs hook, line and sinker, and because of that they are being promoted in a way which is becoming now quite fascistic. 20-mile-an-hour speed limits.
Well, I'm just looking at as we speak, I'm just looking at the embankment, and there are very few cars on it, but they're crawling along because the embankment has a 20-mile-an-hour limit, speed cameras all the way down. And I don't mind a 20-mile-an-hour limit outside of school for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. But, I mean, all this madness does actually is slow things down and create even more pollution, surely.
That's correct. Absolutely right. It's a revenue-generating exercise. This and low-traffic neighbourhood schemes, they're now producing play streets. They are now producing hospital streets where the filth of the motorist exhaust is not allowed to pollute a hospital air. And it's backed up by most fatuous claims, such as, if we do not have ULEGs to the Greater London boundary, 4,000 lives will be prematurely lost. Total nonsense, absolute nonsense.
And ULEZ actually is coming to the whole country. That's the point I'm making. Manchester are looking at similar proposals. On a happier note, Richard Town, you're a member, a supporter of the Vulcan Trust. Now, I as a kid, remember air shows and seeing the Vulcan bomber, and I turned up with optimism at Goodwood a few years ago, being told that the Vulcan would fly, and it didn't. What's the situation with the Vulcan bomber right now?
Well, I support XM655, which was one of the squadrons which went down to the Falklands, and one of the squadron's bombs out of the number that were dropped took out the runway at Port Stanley Airport. Having done so, that denied the logistic support that General Galtieri needed in order to continue his invasion of the Falklands. They ran out of supplies and we ran over them, and the white flag was run up over Port Stanley. Now, XM655 is in engine running worthiness condition. It runs twice a year at Wellsfield Airport. It's just south of Coventry, and it is ready to fly. And
is it?
It will be ready to fly. Now, unfortunately, the Civil Aviation Authority won't allow it because of the accident that happened at Shoreham Airport with the Hawker Hunter that came down 5 years ago, and they've tightened up the rules. However, if the enthusiasts are allowed their way, we would like to do a goodwill visit to Kiev and perhaps show off the 1962 nuclear power that we had then in the Cold War, which taught the Russians a thing or two and kept them away from our shores.
Whether Kiev's the right decision or not, one thing for certain, it's an extraordinary aircraft. And that mission, flying from Ascension Island to the Falklands to bomb with, I think, 4 refuelings on the way there and back, was one of the most amazing feats in the whole of RAF history. It's kind of been forgotten a bit, hasn't it?
I'm afraid they have. There are several Falklands memorial services taken around the year, and we should remember that the price of freedom that we now enjoy, me sitting here to you, talking to you, is eternal vigilance.
I'm afraid it is. Richard Town, thank you very much indeed. No good news there from Richard Town on Talking Pints. The war against the motorists is absolutely in full swing. London is the test bed for what is coming to all the rest of you. Thank you. OK, I've got a couple of seconds left with you. Let's go to Barrage the Farage. One viewer asks, oh, here we are, stay with me, Richard. Will Sadiq Khan be re-elected is the question I'm asked.
He has been nominated by London Labour, but London Labour are very unhappy with his record on knife crime, particularly.
Yes.
He's failed on knife crime, and not only that, but he actually undermined the Cressida Dick, the commissioner, and that has been proved now. And unfortunately, we have now got a new commissioner who is not so, who is more pliant.
Yeah, I think that may well be right. Laura asks, is that tie you're wearing a Christmas present? Yes, it is. It's Ben. Thank you very much indeed for the tie. I got a few. You see, the thing is, I wear a different tie every single day on this show. I'm not trying to compete with Jon Snow, formerly of Channel 4 News, but because of that, people buy me ties. I've got a huge collection of ties. So yes, is the answer. I rather like it. What do you think? Farage@gbnews.uk. Let me know your views. Ryan asks me, could Boris be back by next Christmas? I don't think so, Ryan. I think he's got his very avid supporters. Of course he has. But I think too much damage has been done. Too much faith has been lost. Richard, you've been a Conservative all your life. What do you think?
I think that he was a very, very good mayor, and he did an excellent job, together with Ken Livingstone beforehand for the Olympics.
Yeah,
he did a superb job for that, and I'm afraid he lost the plot a little bit when he went into the House of Commons.
I think that time has gone. I agree. And we had Ken Livingstone on last week, and there we are. Ken very much on the left, and yet he did do some good things as mayor. I agree with you. Yeah. I agree with you absolutely. We're out. We're over. We're done. Tonya Buxton is in tonight, and she's going to stand in for Mark Stein.
Hello. Hi, Nigel.
Hi there.
I have such a great show coming up this evening. It's blown my mind. I've got all my heroes of the lockdown resistance on the show this evening joining me, giving some great advice. So now for the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK will see a cold and frosty start for many, but turning wetter in the west. Here are the details. A cold and icy morning across northern Scotland with sleet and snow showers, turning cloudy as rain and hill snow arrives from the south, turning windy too. A wet morning across Northern Ireland with brisk winds developing. The rain could be heavy at times, leading to some tricky travelling conditions. Cloud amounts increasing through Tuesday morning across northern England, the wind picking up too, icy stretches around first thing as the cold air lingers. A cloudy and damp morning for Wales and the Liverpool Bay Area as rain moves in from the west, the rain turning heavy as the morning progresses, temperatures rising after a cold start. A patchy frost across the Midlands Tuesday morning, but temperatures quickly rising as clouds spread in from the west. The risk of rain arriving as the morning progresses, with the winds increasing too. A cold and frosty start for many across East Anglia tomorrow morning, with some morning sunshine. Cloud amounts increasing from the west as the morning moves on, with rain arriving later. A chilly start to the day across southern England, with the best of any morning sunshine in the east. Clouds increasing as the morning progresses, turning windy too, with rain later. Wet and windy weather will continue eastwards through the day, with snow falling over Scotland. Temperatures on the mild side for many.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners